I need to adjust this up or down, and that's just these little clips here.
Yeah, no problem.
So
Okay.
just make sure you get it just to with all. I think there's going to be just three of us, and it should be pretty tight.
And then autofocuses on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's just a matter of framing.
Like from right in here.
And we're going to put it right in the middle. So you're going to go first. I'm going to follow behind you as soon as the lights come up. It'll be in front of folks, but it'll be okay. Woohoo! All right, let's go. Go ahead. Right here should do it.
I'm in the way. No, no, no.
All right, let's give it up for Amy. And Tia is coming. Our director is coming. All right. So as promised, and Abby, start my 30-minute clock. So do y'all like that? Yeah. I'm sorry, I get distracted. All right. So thank you for coming back. And you got another one tonight?
Yes, in Baltimore at the Bourse Theater. If anyone has friends in what?
Charles.
Oh, the Charles Theater. The Bourse is in Philadelphia. That's tomorrow. I'm always getting ahead of myself.
So let me just give you a chance to sort of, I guess you've been going with the film now, so what's it like to be out with the film and showing it to actual audiences?
Well, I was just, the reason I was texting, I was just letting Tia know that, oh, there's Tia.
Tia!
I was waiting for the elevator, sorry.
So, I can introduce Tia, so that's my great honor. Tia Lessin and Carl Deal are the Oscar-nominated filmmakers who made Steal the Story, Please. They were nominated for an Oscar for Trouble the Water about Hurricane Katrina. Tia recently won 3 Emmys for her film The Janes. It's the story of the underground abortion network in Chicago in the 1960s. And they did Citizen Coke. They were Michael Moore's producers. And when it comes to this film, you asked what it's been like to go around the country. They have, I mean, she'll talk about how they crafted it, but they are master weavers, remarkable storytellers. They have so much to work with and so little time to do it in. And first, before it goes into theaters for the theatrical release, it goes to the film festivals around the country. The first was DC Docs here in Washington, D.C. That's starting again. And they have won over a dozen awards. This is so rare.
15 to be exact.
Oh, 15. Yes, that's over a dozen. 15 audience favorite awards for either Best Film or Best Documentary from Santa Fe International Film Festival, Santa Barbara, Seattle, St. Louis, Savannah, Woodstock, Oslo, Norway, the Human International Film Festival, audience favorite awards, and grand jury prizes. So the audiences have been absolutely wonderful. And to get that number of audience favorite awards, that's where the audiences vote, right? Every place really letting the corporate platform, film providers know there is a huge audience out there for this kind of programming. But what they're having then to let people know, if they would provide the platform, is that people are hungry for independent media.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I'm late is I was over in the Star Wars theater, the big house they call it, where we were last night, and I took a picture of the audience because there were, 40 or 50 people there, and it's a good film, but it's a 35 millimeter film, and I think that's why it's in that house. And we don't have a 35 millimeter print, we don't have a 70 millimeter print. That's sort of what draws a lot of audiences. We don't have a lot of ad money, in fact, very little. But we do have a superhero in the form of Amy Goodman and Zazu's dog. And we believe that this should be enough to entice an audience. And this is a time we need to cheer for something. And we can cheer for the journalists that are risking their freedom and their lives and their careers every single day. And we can cheer for independent media while we still have it. And what's remarkable about what Amy does every single day with many fewer resources than the commercial media is that she reports from all over the globe, uplifts voices, is out in the field doing, the work that we show in the film, and breaking stories. And not only breaking stories, but sharing them generously with media all over the country. It's why we call this film Steal the Story, Please.
Because we consider an exclusive a failure. If we're the only ones who are letting you know, we hope it's stolen, we hope it's shared. It's critical in this day and age, and there's no more important time than right now. The president calls the media the enemy of the people. I think he's confusing himself with the people. And it is a huge problem because there's a reason why the First Amendment, it's the First Amendment, right? That freedom of the press is enshrined in the Constitution. It's all about your right to know. And that's what makes a democracy meaningful. I was just at a WPFW fundraiser. They were the film before you, and that's where Democracy Now! Got its start 30 years ago in Washington, D.C., on Champlain Avenue. And we had our 30th anniversary in New York at Riverside Church, where Dr. King gave his famous address a year to the day before he was assassinated, April 4th, 1967. He gave that speech against the Vietnam War. And he said that my country is the greatest purveyor of violence on earth. He was pilloried by the corporate media. I have the Life magazine issue that talks about his speech as a disservice to his cause, his country, and his people. Saying it read like a script out of Radio Hanoi as he spoke against the war in Vietnam. And so he just doubled down because he saw materialism, racism, militarism, all connected. And so we had our anniversary there. 2,000 people came out. And Juan Gonzalez flew in from Chicago, the great Juan, who's been with Democracy Now! For the full 30 years, who's one of the founders of the Young Lords in New York, put out the newspaper Palante. And then we had Hooray for the Riff Raff, a young musical group singing their song Palante, Ever Forward. And then Nermeen Sheikh spoke about the importance of independent media. Michael Stipe of REM sang, Patti Smith sang Peaceable Kingdom. Angela Davis spoke about her life and the importance of what it meant to have a media that provided a forum for people like her to speak. Mossab Abu Toha, the great Palestinian poet who just won the Pulitzer Prize for his essays in the New Yorker, read his poem Under the Rubble. And then we looked out in the audience and said, not sure how to end these 30 years to launch the next century, but I think we see someone who can help. The boss, Bruce Springsteen, and he came up and sang Streets of Minneapolis, and then all together the musicians gathered on the stage and sang Patti Smith's iconic song, People Have the Power. And that's what will save us. That's what drives Democracy Now!, what drives WPFW, what drives WHUT, Howard University PBS, and what drives this film, Steal This Story, Please. It's up to you to get the word out. Every time you tell someone about a film that you liked, you are not only seeing it yourself, you are opening the door somewhere at a theater that didn't decide to run it until it filled AFI Silver, and then somewhere in Colorado, somewhere in Mississippi. Well, it started with IFC, the biggest art, they're called art houses, cinema, independent cinemas in New York.
Well, and that's right, opening weekend on April 10th, we broke box office records at that art house theater. It was the biggest opening weekend for any documentary in the past decade at that new #1 art house theater. So we believe there's a very big audience for this film, and that's definitely been shown in the festival circuit. We will be in this theater until Thursday. That's the booking. It's up to you to make sure that we're here beyond Thursday, that we're here Friday and Saturday and Sunday into the weekend. Why is it up to you? Because you have the power to spread the word, to tell your friends and family, to reach out to your neighbors. And if you have folks around the country, we have the film around the country, and you can go to our website, stealthestoryplease.org.
Stealthestory.org.
I'm sorry, stealthestory.org. Our Instagram is stealthestoryplease. One note, I want to thank Chris and the DC Labor Film Festival. This is my second film here. My first film was in that big marble building along Whitehurst Freeway. What do they call that now? We won't say it. But we did a beautiful screening there, and the carpet was red, and it was really meaningful to me. It was a film about garment workers in U.S. Saipan that were trafficked from China and from Vietnam and from Philippines. My grandmother was a garment worker. She was a card-carrying member of the ILGWU, and she got that $92 pension every month until she died at the age of 94 in Rockville, Maryland. So anyway, I thank you for providing a forum for that film. My grandmother was able to come to that.
That's what it's about.
Yeah. And thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you both. And good. Thank you for making this film. Thank you for making that film. All right. I want to get as many questions in here. Keep the questions sharp and with answers, and we'll get everybody. We'll get as many as we can. So I'm going to start in the back. I see way in the back row there. Just shout it out, and if we can't hear it, we'll repeat it. Just keep it short.
Yeah. This seems like an existential fight that you are bringing, because there's so much cynicism and apathy with respect to how we view, what's available to us with respect to news. So what is the most effective way to fight and to stand up and to try to resist what we're losing, and to try to take back what we could possibly get with respect to press and honest media?
Thank you.
I think overall it's first gathering news that you can make decisions about. I deeply feel it's supporting independent media in this country. As the corporate media, these huge multinational companies merge with each other, it is narrowing the platforms that you can get information on. In order to have a meaningful democracy, you need information. We teach scores of kids, well, thousands of kids come through our studios every week at Democracy Now!, watching the broadcast live 8 to 9 in the morning. Their teachers bring them, middle schoolers, high schoolers, college, graduate students, journalists from around the world. And I always say, what's amazing about the internet is you don't have the traditional gatekeepers. You can learn so much and reach out to people all over the world. But it is also a global rumor mill, and we know, especially for young people, the silos of hate you can fall into. And it's so important to find trusted sources where you can branch out, where the sky is the limit, where you can learn so much and hear people speaking for themselves, closest to the story, not the typical pundits who know so little about so much, explaining the world to us and getting it so wrong. And democracynow.org is a great way, and Instagram, Democracy Now!, and YouTube, to find the other sources that you can really trust. I really believe that independent media is the oxygen of a democracy. And as Maria Ressa said, the Nobel Peace Prize winning journalist from the Philippines, a woman who certainly knows who was under attack by Duterte, who's now on trial at The Hague. The rights you lose today, you may never get back.
Thank you.
There was, right there.
Okay, so I realize now his question was so much better. How can you get the news out? But I was struck by something in the film, and I'm wondering if you can elaborate. So when I saw, as a young-ish person, people being embedded in the Iraqi troops, I thought, oh my God, we're getting the full information because they're right there. So that stuck out to me in your film. It blew my mind a little bit. Anything you want to add to that?
That's a critical point, the question of the embedding process. And I hope we get to you next. The embedding process, I've always believed, it was perfected by the Pentagon, that the embedding process brought the media to an all-time low. As I say in the film, as you said, you're thinking, oh wow, these journalists get to go right there on the battlefield, tell us what it's like. But you are eating with the troops, sleeping with the troops, your life is in their hands. It tells you something. It's what it's like to be at the trigger end of a war. What is it like to be at the target end? So often in the lead up to the Iraq War, you had the global news hosts, I sort of hesitate to say journalists, but these news hosts going into a tank or into a plane, sitting in the pilot's seat and saying, what's it like to hit these buttons? What's it like to be at the receiving end of hitting those buttons? We are not supposed to be circling the wagons around the White House at a time of war. We see Hegseth excoriating journalists for even raising the number of injured and dead U.S. service members. Are you kidding? I thought we're supposed to deeply care about them and know about them. I see the media as a huge kitchen table that stretches across the globe, that we all sit around and debate and discuss the most important issues of the day. And anything less than that is a disservice to the servicemen and women of this country. They can't have these public debates on military bases about whether they're sent to kill or be killed. Anything less than that is a disservice to a democratic society.
Tia.
Just to add to that, there's an agreement that these embedded journalists have to sign with the Pentagon that essentially gives the Pentagon control over vetting their coverage before it goes out to the world. So that is a devil's bargain. I can tell you a little story, I'll try to keep it brief, but when I went down to Alexandria, Virginia in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in September 2005, Alexandria was a couple hours north of New Orleans. Why did I go there instead of New Orleans? Well, first of all, the city was off limits to civilians. But secondly, Alexandria was where the military, the National Guard from New Orleans was returning to Louisiana. They didn't have their high water vehicles. They had left those in Baghdad, but they were coming back because their community was underwater and they were really badly needed. That kind of explains where was the rescue. All those days after Katrina when people were standing on their rooftops asking for help. But we were there to watch the National Guardsmen and women turn in their guns and go down to their communities. We asked for access from the National Guard, which is a part of the Army, and we wanted to get on the tarmac. We wanted to go down with the National Guard into New Orleans, and you know, they took our names, they asked us a bunch of questions, and then they said, Fahrenheit 9/11 ruined it for all of you guys. You can't come down with us. And they didn't know that we'd been producers on Fahrenheit 9/11. They just knew that Fahrenheit 9/11 had critical coverage of the war and of their recruiting of young men and women. And so we weren't able to, you know, accompany the National Guard, but I think we got a better story as a result. I think we have to really question when we see the coverage of war in this moment.
I know we're turning to the audience. I just want to ask the audience a question, and that is how you found out about this. I'm always interested in the flow of information. If you could raise your hands, how many of you heard from a newsletter from AFI? If you raise your hand. How many heard from the Labor Film Festival? How many heard from Democracy Now? Uh-huh. And
PFW.
WPFW, WHUT.
How many of you just walked by the AFI Theater? Wow. Oh, awesome. Good choice.
But I didn't mean to cut you off.
What story that you've covered has made the largest impact on you?
Oh my gosh, what story have I covered that's made the largest impact on me? I can't say it's one story, but I think it's a theme. It's a great question. I think it's how so many of the people that I've interviewed give me hope. Their courage is astounding. Whether it's the people of East Timor, a third of the population killed by a U.S. armed Indonesian army, and still they believe someday they would be free. I was shocked by this. Ultimately, they were able to vote for their independence, and they were right. It's one of the newest nations in the world, Timor-Leste, it's called, East Timor. The people of Haiti, doing all they could to vote. Most people still voted, even when they were gunned down going to the polls. And in this country, most people didn't vote. It's just a little more than half of the population in this country. And the administration is trying to bring that number way down, which is terrifying. All the restrictions on voting, all of the gerrymandering, it's a very serious issue. It's people of Minneapolis. It is so amazing. I think of one person, and you see her being dragged out in this film at the end. And Tia and Carl are amazing, is that they kept working on this film right up until the theatrical release. And so they include the crackdown in Minneapolis. This immigration hunt, the hunting down of human beings. By the way, who gets hit first? Here was President Trump saying they're going for the worst of the worst, but who gets hit first? It's the most law-abiding immigrants who do their check-ins, who pay their taxes. Percentage-wise, it's probably more than President Trump ever paid, right? Immigrants pay taxes when they work, and they're the ones who are getting caught first. But the horror of Alex Preti, Renee Good being gunned down in the streets by immigration agents. And here you saw in one of the fast clips at the end, Alia Rahman. She is woman who was headed to the doctor in her car. They smashed her window, and as she shouted to them, "I am disabled," she's both autistic, she uses a cane, they said to her, and you can hear it on the longer videotape, "Too effing late." But like the president, they use the full word. And she's dragged out. She is seriously injured as they pull her shoulders back. She is sent to the Whipple Detention Center in Minneapolis. She's jailed. When she gets out, we interview her. Not the typical pundits, but herself. And she talked about what happened. Ilhan Omar, the Congress member from Minneapolis, Somali refugee, the only Somali refugee Congress member, who President Trump calls her garbage. President Trump calls the entire Somali community of Minneapolis garbage. The Congress member Ilhan Omar invites her to the State of the Union, where President Trump addresses the nation. And even though Alia Rahman has been seriously injured, she goes. It's amazing. She sits in the gallery like many of the other congressional guests. And many people were standing up as Trump spoke, applauding, sitting down, standing up, applauding, sitting down, as the Democrats would if it was a Democratic president. Alia stood up, and she just bore silent witness when he denigrated the Minneapolis community, and she was dragged out of there as she stood in silent witness. We'd invited her on to talk about her experience of being at the State of the Union before any of that. So the next morning she went from jail to our studio, and she said, "I'm wearing the same clothes I wore last night to the State of the Union because I just got out of jail." And that story that she told us was picked up by the New York Times, the Washington Post, what's left of it, all the media. They repeated her words, and that's why Tia and Carl have taken that theme and called the film "Steal This Story, Please."
How are we doing on time? 5 minutes. All right, one or two more questions. Let's go to this side. Right there.
Yes, sir. I've got a question. The segment of the film with Mike McCurry, and the voiceover says that Amy Goodman is asking questions that the normal White House correspondents will not ask. There's a question that I have had to ask, and I don't understand why no one asked. It's simply this question. If Trump had accepted in December of 2020, instead of the "be there, be wild" statement, he said, "I accept the results of the election, would Ashley Babbitt and Officer Sicknick still be alive today?" Why has no one in the media ever asked that question?
Are you thinking of becoming a journalist? Because it's a very good question, and I am not.
I'm writing a book about it.
Oh, good. Well, that's very good. You know, you're reminding me of Dave Isay, who's in the film, who started StoryCorps, the peer interviewing. You take your grandmother or your coworker, anyone, into one of these booths, and you interview them, and it's now being archived in the Library of Congress. But he called me at WBAI. Well, he was calling all sorts of news stations. "Why aren't you doing the story of the museum that these two addicts are setting up in the Lower East Side? Two people who are addicted to drugs. It's a museum of drug paraphernalia." I said, "Okay," to the person on the phone. "It sounds interesting. We're just inundated with news." He called every single day. "Why aren't you doing the story about the museum that someone is about to set up?" Finally, I said, "Well, why don't you do it?" And he said, "What?" I said, "Well, we are very busy. I think it sounds very interesting." He came to the station, got a tape recorder. He interviewed the two people. It was magnificent. We played it on the news. That weekend it played on Weekend Edition on NPR. He was going to go to medical school, but he decided, well, I think I will be a journalist, and he's changing the world in his way. So I think it's a great question, and get yourself over there.
All right. We got another film coming in, because that's what AFI does. They show great film after a great film. Remember, spread the word. Let's make sure that it's so popular that we can keep this film here for another couple.
2 seconds. What's your question?
Go ahead.
First off, you're really cool.
She said, "You're really cool."
Yeah, well, it is very very air conditioned.
But I was wondering, how do you deal with like the mental capacity of seeing all these people die?
It's a very good question. How do you deal with the mental capacity of seeing people die? Of covering such difficult issues, whether I'm personally seeing it or not. As I told Tia and Carl, I suffer from PTSD every day, post-traumatic show disorder. And that's both, I mean, it is very hard. And I think perhaps the best therapy is that it's not just on my shoulders, it's on all of our shoulders. And that's what independent media is all about. We have very serious decisions to make about the country we live in, the most powerful country on earth. The president occupies the most powerful position on earth, but there is a force more powerful, and it's you here in this room with everyone else in cinemas around the country, listening to radio, watching Democracy Now! On TV, reading the transcripts, celebrating independent media around the country and around the world. That movement is more powerful than anything we experience, and that's what gives me most hope. I deeply believe that change is possible, and if you're involved with social change, you will help to build a foundation. We can't predict when that magic moment will come, but when it does, if you've built that foundation, you will help to make history, change the future.
Okay, we have one more thing to do. We're going to take a selfie of Democracy Now! Behind us here. Everybody up here? All right, Democracy Now!
Wait, stay.
All right, Democracy Now! Get those fists up.
Yay! When you said that.
I will.